Hello and welcome to the DePaul Schools Parent Education video series. I'm Tony Kemper, our head of school, and with me on this video is Phil Howell, our Director of Instruction, and Lisa Stepp, our Principal. The Parent Education video series will provide our families and various members of the community with information that we think parents are particularly interested in. And we know from our discussions with many parents this summer, parents are interested in assessment. So we're going to spend 12 to 15 minutes today talking about some general tenets of assessment here at the DePaul School. And we know when assessing progress of students, bright students who learn differently, that there are many questions and there are challenges. We know that a comprehensive and balanced program of assessment is important. So Phil, can you start off by telling us what would be some of the elements of a comprehensive, balanced assessment program?
Sure. The first thing you need to keep in mind to get a full view of how a child is progressing and what their strengths and needs are is you have to look at that child from several different angles. You can't approach a child with a single test or a single viewpoint. There is no test, there is no tool out there that can give a full picture of a child's progress. Every evaluation has its own limitations. So at DePaul, we view a child through 3 different viewpoints, and each of which asks a different question about the child, and each can then be merged together like pieces of a puzzle to form a complete picture, so we truly understand the child. First, we want to understand how a child's performance compares to his or her peers. That way we can see where significant gaps lie in skills or concepts, and we can prioritize a plan of action for that child. Second, we want to track and monitor a child's progress from goal to goal. These short-term goals that will lead a child from where they are to where they need to be. And then third, we want to merge that data with insights from the student, from the families, and from the teachers, so that we can really truly understand what that data is telling us and why we're seeing what we're seeing with the child's progress. For that first viewpoint, to compare a child to his or her peers, we use normed-based testing. And those evaluations ask the question, how does this child's performance compare with other children? And they relate that information through different numbers like stay-nines and percentiles and grade equivalences. The benefit of these tools is that they tell us where a child is in the big picture. They prevent us from just seeing a child's progress from one single goal to the next. They keep us in mind of how far a journey a child actually has to take. And they can hold a school's feet to the fire, per se, and keep that appropriate pressure on for progress. The limitations of those tests, though, is that they are snapshots. They are a single day's performance, which may or may not adequately tell how a child does on an average day or a typical day. And that's a particular issue for students with learning differences because their performance varies so significantly from day to day. There are a lot of other factors that can impede the appropriateness or validity of a norm-based test. Everything from motivation of the student to the fact that these are somewhat artificial tasks. They're, for example, read a passage and answer a multiple choice question that doesn't really relate to an everyday experience of the child. They're also not capable of telling us why an error was made, why an answer is incorrect. It's simply a right or wrong statement per question. So it doesn't offer us information on how close a child was to having the correct answer, or whether the child misunderstood what the question was.
Which is key information for teachers as they plan for instruction.
Absolutely. And the trend we're seeing nationwide is for schools and parents to rely almost exclusively on this kind of evaluation for students. And that does not give a full picture of where a child is. That's not to say norm-based assessments are bad or inadequate, they're just not sufficient on their own. So that's why we have to take our second viewpoint, which is to look more closely at the current goals that have been set for the student. And these are short-term goals that the teachers and administrators have set for the child to lead that child from where they are to the long-term goals that are set for him or her. And to do that type of assessment, that's the fascinating part of instruction at DePaul, because to truly get a read on how a child is developing skills or concepts, you can't rely on a pencil and paper test alone.
Exactly.
Especially for a child with a learning difference, we have to look for more authentic reads on what a child knows or can do. And so teachers use everything from discussions to hands-on activities to written reflections to even role plays or real-life types of enactments or situations to try to determine as appropriately and accurately as possible how is this child developing skills and concepts. And then the third viewpoint that we have to look at is anecdotal information, those insights that parents and students and teachers acquire just by relating to each other and interacting with the student in real life. And in our discussions with families, this is often the most important and insightful aspect or viewpoint to help us truly understand the child. Parents will tell us whether the child is taking risk in reading outside of school. And students will talk about factors that may be impeding his or her learning or skewing the results of a test, such as anxiety or fatigue. The child can also offer insights into why he or she is experiencing sudden and marked progress. There might be certain types of activities or study strategies that are proving to be most effective. And so we can capitalize on that once we discuss that and talk about it. And the teachers can add all the nuances to the learning process that otherwise would be lost. Teachers can identify, for example, that when an error on a math computation problem isn't a lack of understanding of the process, but might be simply disorganization, or can talk about a child's lack of reading comprehension being something much more specific, like difficulty with abstract thinking. And can even talk about the environmental factors that either benefit a child's learning process or impeding a child's learning process. And so that's why we emphasize communication between school and family so much here at DePaul, is we have to merge through discussions those three viewpoints of where the child is to really get a full picture.
And a balanced picture of
Balanced.
what they're doing.
Yes, exactly.
I'm impressed by how not only robust this is, but how personalized it is, because our children are differently, so one template report card is just not going to be sufficient.
Right.
And just to try to assess, oh, my understanding or my child's understanding is at 93%, that tells so very little. Now, Lisa, our teachers under your charge are incredibly skilled in assessment. As you walk about as principal, what are some of the things that you typically see, or some of the ways in which our teachers are assessing student progress or student need?
I tell you, Tony, I think this is one of the areas that we work the most toward in terms of our professional development and training, is to help teachers look not only at what their subgroup or class needs are in terms of instruction, but how to really laser and look at the individual student. The first step that we find is we have to know where they are when they come to us, whether they're in second grade, whether they're in 8th grade. What do their skills look like in reading, in math, in writing? We have to make it a point of also knowing what is expected of that child at a particular grade level. And many times for our students and for our families, they think it's a very easy aspect of putting those puzzle pieces together. If my child is of 5th grade age, then my child should automatically begin with 5th grade curriculum. That's not always the case with students who have learning differences. What we have to do is find out where those foundational gaps are and fill those so that we can move them toward that particular grade level that they should be working. And it is true, many would define assessment, especially when you look at grades 5 through 8, as being the more traditional or formal assessment. Classrooms would be filled with answer sheets, paper and pencil tests. But for learning disabled kids, to Phil's point, that is not the best way to assess what a student understands or does not understand. As I'm in classrooms, what I see teachers doing is watching and evaluating as students are in the process of learning. As they are dealing with particular concepts in language and math, how do they begin to break them apart or build upon them to learn? As I walk in classrooms, I see such things as a lot of hands-on, multisensory learning, and that many believe and will tout the value of hands-on learning for elementary children. But they seem to have this artificial line of when students reach 5th grade through 8th grade, that's no longer needed. What we find at the DePaul School is as the concepts become more complicated, as they connect more, that ability to make it multisensory and to concretize it is essential, especially in math as we're moving into pre-algebra and algebra. So you would see students working very much with hands-on activities and teachers assessing how students do with those when they're asked to show what they know or understand. We also have students engaging in written assessments where they're asked to show what they understand about what is read to them, what they read independently, and a teacher can immediately begin to see where the breakdowns are. They get the big picture, or they're missing the supporting details, or just the opposite. They get a string of details, but they don't know how to wrap those up into understanding the main idea. How a teacher addresses or reteaches that is different from child to child, even though two children may be sitting side by side in a classroom. The teacher's approach must be very individualized. We also see that we engage students in talking about how they're learning. What works for you, Phil, when you study for the social studies? Tony, you got an A on this test when last time you couldn't do it. What has happened? What has been done differently? And when a student begins to know how they learn and to begin to think about the learning process, then that's when we know that regardless of the concepts we try to teach them, the ideas are there, the steps are there.
That's why the Learning to Learn curriculum is so important in what we do.
Absolutely. And I think it seems complicated when you talk about informal assessment, but it's really not. Our teachers need to know first and foremost, what are you looking to assess? If you're looking to assess science understanding, you want to understand about photosynthesis, then rule out any other difficulty so that you can focus upon, do they understand photosynthesis? If it's a reading assignment, then yes, teachers should step back and see what students can do independently so they can clearly evaluate that reading skill. So they have to know what they're assessing, plan the activity that will target that assessment, and then step back and watch the student work and engage in that learning.
So there's a level of precision. We don't want murky questions.
Exactly.
We don't want confusing questions
Exactly.
or layered questions. But one of the articles I just recently read, I think we were sharing it through email today, one of the attributes of great teachers is that they ask great questions.
Absolutely.
Deep questions, meaningful questions, and that's how students can then be given an opportunity to really think more deeply.
Exactly.
In the remaining time we have, I know we're getting close to distributing the midterm reports. And what would be one or two recommendations that you would give our DePaul families who are preparing to receive, some of them new parents, a DePaul School report card for the very first time?
Right.
So what are some recommendations or some insights you would share? Phil, you want to go first?
Sure. My first recommendation would be for parents to go over that report card with the students. And you'll find that the teacher comments are directed toward the student rather than to the parents, because we want the student's investment and involvement in the evaluative process. So involve them and get their feedback on whether their self-evaluation aligns with what teachers are saying. That's a crucial difference in our progress reports.
Exactly.
The second thing I'd like to call attention to is a section on the report card that's entitled the attitudes and skills of success.
Right.
And these are attributes that DePaul has identified through research to have significant impact on long-term success in school and career and other aspects of life. And this section provides feedback from parents on how they view each child's progress on what is a long-term evolution, a long-term process of growth. These are not grades. They shouldn't be interpreted as grades, but they are pieces of input that teachers have given after meeting together and discussing each individual student specifically.
Lisa?
And I would also add, I know that many parents are used to the traditional report card and they're used to seeing A, B, C, D. And A has a specific meaning on most report cards. I'd ask parents to really look carefully because that is not what ours typically represents. For example, if a student gets an A in a particular area in language, that addresses the student so that it means you have reached dependable mastery of our current goals. It doesn't mean that you're an excellent student as opposed to getting a D, which we would state as this is a content of great difficulty. Keep working.
Which means that we're going to keep working on it.
Exactly.
It's not you aren't getting this.
Exactly.
It's what we need
And
to do.
it is a report card in the midterm which asks students and families to engage, and then you should be able to walk away with that midterm and say, okay, here are the goals as we begin Monday morning. And there's a special denotation on a report card that a parent might see, and it's called PCT. And sometimes when a teacher is evaluating a student, the initials PCT will show up, and that means please contact the teacher, because there's more that the teacher wants to communicate with the family than just a particular letter grade or an elementary, a number. So that would be the next step. Please give the teacher a call so they can share even more in-depth information than a single paper could show you.
And as with any DePaul matter, in this case assessment, but in any matter, anytime that parents do have questions, we encourage the phone
Yes.
call so that we can make sure that we're all in corporate understanding of what is most important to us, and that is your child, our students' education. We're looking forward to future parent education videos on subjects that matter to our parents and that we think are important in the school community. Thank you very much. Phil, Lisa.
Thank you.